Let's get straight to our guest. Thank you for that news, by the way, Rudy. And Joseph Pearce is the author of a new article called Unsung Heroes from Crisis Magazine. He's a senior contributor to Crisis Magazine. He is director of book publishing at the Augustine Institute, editor of the St. Austin Review, and series editor of the Ignatius Critical Editions, an acclaimed biographer and literary scholar. His latest book is called Benedict XVI, Defender of the Faith. It's newly published by Tan Books. His website is jpearce.co. JPEARCE.co, not com.co. Joseph Pearce's latest book, The Good, the Bad, and the Beautiful, History in Three Dimensions, is newly published by Ignatian Press. And again, we're going to talk about the Unsung Heroes of Christendom. Joseph Pearce, how you doing? Good morning.
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Good to talk with you. And I'll never forget being at a conference that I emceed one time it was a homeschool conference, and afterwards, all the speakers and little me, got to go out to a meal. And there's no reason you would remember this, but I remember sitting next to you and just having a little bit of time with you, and it was such a delight to get to know you a little better. But this was many years ago. But now here we are on the radio together. So what a delight! Thanks for taking time to be on with us. And boy, you're busy, aren't you? You're writing books, and you're doing a lot of things. You got you got a lot of balls in the air at the moment, don't you?
Yeah, so I keep myself busy writing, editing, speaking, teaching. Never a dull moment. And I'm also a paterfamilias. I have a wife and children. That also keeps me busy.
Yes. So you mentioned in this first submission of Unsung Heroes of Christendom that this is something that you really have had on your heart for a long time, and then Eric Sammons of Crisis Magazine said, well, go ahead and do a series on it. So why is this topic and this series so important to you?
Well, I did a series for Crisis Magazine a year or so back on great literature in a nutshell, where I sought basically to take 50 of the greatest books of Western civilization and try to encapsulate them in 1,000 words. And I just thought doing something similar with the heroes of Christian civilization, who aren't as well known as they should be, would also be fun. So I suggested this to Eric Sammons, and he said, that's a great idea, go ahead and do it. So we launched the series a month or so back. I wrote an introductory essay on what an unsung hero is, and then we had about 3 or 4 essays since then we've actually published in the series. Don't know how many there'll be. The last series was about 50. So I imagine it'll be something similar.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm reading is the first one here. So let's define an unsung hero. It probably goes without saying this is somebody that a lot of people have never heard of, but still lived an extraordinary life. And so I don't think you give any examples yet in this first series, and I'm guessing the sky's the limit because there's so many unsung heroes out there. But what do you define as an unsung hero, especially when it comes to Christendom? And give us a little background of what you have in mind.
Yeah, well, there are 3 words there I think we need to define: unsung, hero, and Christendom. So let's start with the last word first. Christendom is Christian civilization. So the mystical body of Jesus Christ is the Catholic Church. The mystical body of Jesus Christ in time is the Church militant, the Church at war. We are Miles Christi, soldiers of Christ. And the template for history, if you like, is set up by the gospel, that in every generation we have those who are loyal disciples. We also have the Judas within the church, the traitor, the heretic, the corrupt person within the church, the Judas. We have Caesar. We always have the power of of secularism against us. So the heroes are. So that's what Christendom is. In the ultimate sense of the word, heroism and holiness are the same thing, because to be a hero is to lay down your life self-sacrificially for the beloved, Jesus Christ, our neighbor, etc. So in the deepest sense of the word, heroism and holiness are the same thing. Saints are all heroes. But there are some people who have not been canonized that are heroes nonetheless, because they have made a major contribution to Christian civilization, even though their personal life, they might not have been saints. So I want to sing the praises of those people as well, warts and all, so to speak. So the unsung are people just not as well known as they should be, that are neglected, ignored, or forgotten. Some people might have been famous in their own time, several hundred years ago, but if you like, been buried by the sands of time, and I want to dig them up again and resurrect them, as it were. So, unsung heroes of Christendom, those heroes of Christian civilization who are not as well known as they should be.
Let me go back to the Christendom point, because if you had asked me an hour ago about Christendom, I would have said, oh, that was a historical time period. It was the High Middle Ages. It was when, Bonaventure and Aquinas and Francis were walking the earth, and Albert and the church and the state were very much united in many ways, and everybody was walking around with halos in their head, which I say that as a joke, but that's not the case, is it? Christendom was not a particular time period. Are we living in Christendom now, or can you define that a bit?
Yeah, so basically, we go right back to St. Augustine. There's the city of God and there's the city of man. The city of God ultimately is heaven, but until unless we get there, and until we get there, while we're living our 70 years and 10, our mortal lives, we are trying to build the city of God within the city of man. That is what Christendom is the city of God in time. The church triumphants, the church in heaven. This is the church within the city of man, striving to build the city of God. So that goes right back to the time of Christ. And everything about Christendom is there in the teaching of Jesus Christ, and it goes through every single generation. There's no golden age in the past, and there's no golden age in the future except for heaven. The golden age in the future is when we die, if we're in a state of grace.
Joseph Pearce is my guest. His article is called Unsung Heroes of Christendom. His website, jpearce.co, and he's also the author of many books, as I mentioned a moment ago. So how do you go about researching these? Because the very fact that they're unsung probably means that there isn't a whole lot of material about some of these. And if there is a lot of material, they would not be unsung. So there's a little bit of an inherent irony there. So what's your methodology?
Well, I aim to keep people surprised. So the first one was the unsung Saint Nicholas, for instance.
I'll tell you what, you're going to keep people. Let's keep people very surprised, because we got to take a break. Okay, so I'm sorry, Joseph, I should have asked you that question right before a break, but it shows my amateur skills at hosting a morning radio show. But we'll be right back with Joseph Pearce after this, and he'll be able to answer that question. Welcome back to Catholic Drive Time on this January 3rd, Wednesday. Dave Palmer filling in for Adrian Fonseca today. Thank you for being part of the Guadalupe Radio Network family. You can find out more about the network on our website, grnonline.com, and put a /raffle after that, and you can find out about the car raffle that began yesterday with our kickoff show. Joseph Pearce is my guest. His article is called Unsung Heroes of Christendom. His website, jpearce.co. And Joseph, I apologize. I asked you a question, and then the music started last time. But I was asking you about the methodology of finding these unsung heroes, and how will you go about that?
Yeah, so obviously I want to keep an element of surprise, so I'm not going to give the name of unsung heroes that are in the future, but I can obviously talk about the ones we've already published. So the first essay was the unsung Saint Nicholas. And of course, this was beginning of December, St. Nicholas Day. We all know Santa Claus. We also all know St. Nicholas. He's certainly not unsung. I mean, some people might think he's sung too much in the secular culture. But the unsung St. Nicholas is not Saint Nicholas. It's Saint Nicholas Owen, who was an English martyr who built priest holes throughout England and was tortured to death. So most people will not have heard of St. Nicholas Owen, and I threw in for good measure Blessed Nicholas Posgate, who was another English martyr who was actually tortured to death when he was 85 years old. So these are people that we don't know. A Saint Nicholas and a Blessed Nicholas, most people won't know. So that's an example of what I'm doing in the series. But they won't all be saints. So the second one was about a poet, Roy Campbell, who saved the archives of St. John of the Cross from the communists during the Spanish Civil War. Now, he wasn't a saint, but he obviously did something very, very important by saving the archives of a saint. So to give you some idea of, There could be different types of people. Some of them are canonized, some of them emphatically not canonized. They might have been miserable sinners, but nonetheless did something which we should be singing their praises for.
You mentioned also in the article that you will not necessarily limit this to Catholics, and then you said some might not even be Catholics, but will be treated as heroes of Christendom on the basis of their contribution to Christian civilization or their witness to Christian truth. And I got to thinking, and this certainly is not an unsung person, but probably my favorite the historical non-Catholic that comes to mind that I respect a lot would be C.S. Lewis, and he is certainly not unsung. But is this kind of the model of what you're talking about? Somebody that didn't contradict the teachings of the Catholic Church, but just never quite got into full communion?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, C.S. Lewis, I was hoping you were going to say C.S. Lewis when you were doing the preamble there, actually. Yeah, C.S. Lewis is a perfect example of an unsung hero of Christendom who was never received into the Catholic Church. But he's not unsung, as you say. He's he's famous. He won't be in the series because you all know who C.S. Lewis is. I won't give the person's name away, but the one person I have in mind who will certainly be in the series was never a Catholic, but was very, very vocal in calling for equal rights for Catholics, for defending the Catholic Church against lies against it, for correcting the historical record with people even telling lies about the history of the Church. So he was a great defender of the Church without being a Catholic. So he'll be in the series. So there are various characters. I mean, the majority of them will be Catholics, but there will be some. I say I want to keep people guessing. It's not going to be not all going to be saints. They could be historians, they could be writers, they could be soldiers. So we're going to be coming from all sorts of directions in this series.
Yeah, it's speaking of unsung, it always it makes me, I don't know, laugh, or it's interesting to see the names of parishes in a typical diocese, because your typical diocese will have sometimes 2 or 3 St. Francis of Assisi's and maybe a couple of St. Elizabeth Ann Setons and a couple of St. Thomas Aquinas, and I'm always thinking, like, come on, we can be more creative than that. I mean, if I'm the bishop, I'm saying every church has to at least have a different saint's name. Let's not double up, because God bless these wonderful saints like Francis and Aquinas, and of course Our Lady, the best saint of all. But we do tend to kind of focus on the top, Saint Therese of Lisieux, the top 5 or 10, don't we? And that means we're ignoring a whole lot of other people.
Yeah, and and they're the superstars, and thanks be to God for them, of course. But the heaven is full of saints. And most of the saints in heaven have never been canonized by the church. Thank God, because if only canonized saints are in heaven, the rest of us are in trouble. So they're going to be lots of people in heaven. They're not going to formally recognized by the church. So, we have to recognize the fact there are many saints out there that we don't know as saints. And some of them have been canonized and forgotten, and I'll be focusing on them. Some were never canonized for whatever reason. Perhaps because they just were not famous enough, right? They lived quiet lives. And remember the words of Jesus Christ, the great paradox: the last shall be first and the first shall be last. That the least in the kingdom of heaven should be celebrated.
Now, if somebody, comes to you and says, Joseph, you should know about my Aunt Sally. She lived, she died, 15 years ago. She was the saintliest woman I ever met, and she did this and that. Are you open to those kind of stories? I mean, it's just something that a person that maybe was only known within their local community or their family, but they did live a holy and saintly life. I mean, are you open to those kind of suggestions? Can people email you and say, you need to hear about this person?
Well, in theory, yes. Thanks be to God, most of us know someone like that. The unsung heroes of our own lives that have lived good, faithful, self-sacrificial lives, laying down their lives for others. And so obviously there's no way at all that I can sing every unsung hero, because thanks be to God, there are too many of them. But that's the whole point, is I do want to come from different directions so that people do not necessarily know, next week, what sort of hero will it be? So if someone were to send me a very interesting story, I would certainly be open to retelling that.
And if a cause of canonization is ongoing, there's probably thousands of causes of canonization of people that we've never heard of. The fact that that's been opened, does that mean they're no longer unsung, or would you consider maybe bringing attention to somebody whose cause might need to be furthered?
Yeah, so give an example. I was blessed to be at the canonization of Saint Joanna Beretta Molla back in, I think, 2005 at St. Peter's in Rome. But there were 4 or 5 other people that were canonized with her. Now, she's quite well known because, of course, she's a great heroine for life, but the others were not known. So, and I couldn't name them now, truth be told, right? So there are many saints who most people don't know. So that's the whole point. I want to make saints that are not as well known as perhaps they should be or could be, make them better known. There were many people singing the praises of the saints you mentioned, and thanks be to God, and may that continue. But that's not the purpose of this series.
I was talking to Father Kirby yesterday, and he has written a book about the popes and a daily devotion about the popes and their writings. And in a previous interview that he did, he was talking about only 4 popes having the title the Great after their names, one of them being Pope St. John Paul II. One of the greats, he said, was a pope by the name of Martin. And it was interesting because I'd never heard of him. And this is a pope that I guess by popular acclaim is one of the greats. And I was like, never heard of him. And so through history, we have a tendency also to sometimes forget about even the sung heroes, don't we? I mean, there's so much to learn about the Catholic faith that even some of the more sung heroes get kind of washed up as time goes by. Would you agree?
Well, yes. The thing is that some people may have been sung in the past, but be unsung now. So they would be part of the series because if nobody is singing about them now, irrespective if of the fact the whole world might have been singing about them 1,000 years ago, they need to be sung again. So that they become unsung, even if they were sung, so to speak. So that would be part of the series, is that the people that had a great impact in their own time and were greatly revered and perhaps canonized in their own time, but for whatever reason have been forgotten since then, that we need to know about, we need to resurrect, if you like, from the dead and make them known again. So that's absolutely one of the focuses of the series, will be to represent to our generation greats from the past that have been neglected.
Yeah, certainly. You know, Joseph, in the time that we have remaining, we only have a few minutes remaining. You mentioned in one of the last paragraphs of your article about these holy people who reflect the Logos. And today, since it's the holy name of Jesus, and Logos is another name for the second person of the Blessed Trinity, could you reflect on that word? Because I know it has tremendous philosophical and theological significance, and that kind of ties into your project here.
Yeah, logos, that is often translated as word, but in a really deep sense, it's reason. That God is the logos, which is that God is reason, that all reason leads to him, all reason springs from him. So to serve the logos is basically to serve reason. And the other thing we have to realize that ultimately, I talk about heroism and holiness being the same thing, sanity and sanctity are the same thing. Because to be holy is to be in accordance with the Logos, to be in accordance with reason himself. That is sanity. So sanity and sanctity are the same thing, which is another way of saying that is sin is stupid.
That is a good way. And also in my, philosophical studies, I know that some of the more modern, I guess, or more philosophers of the last couple hundred years, people like Kant and Hume, have thrown out this whole idea of essence and nature and logos. And so that's one of the poverties of philosophy, is that the battle of logos gets into the philosophical realm as well. Could anything that you might want to mention that? Because I know you mentioned some of the philosophers like Socrates and Plato and Aristotle in your article.
Yeah, basically, the technical word for what the church teaches philosophically is realism, that things that are metaphysical are real. Goodness is real. Truth is real. Beauty is real. These modern philosophers have thrown all of that out. If something is not physical, it's not real. Well, that's just not true. So these modern philosophies are not realistic in the deeper sense of the word.
All right, Joseph, we're down to the last minute or so. Thank you so much. I do want to direct everybody to Joseph's website, jpearce.co, jpearce, Pearce.co. And his article is called Unsung Heroes of Christendom by Crisis Magazine. And I think we got 30 seconds. Any other projects you want to highlight, Joseph, before we say goodbye to you?
Well, I mean, I've always got new books coming out and new books written. So the most recent one is The Good, the Bad, and the Beautiful, History in Three Dimensions. That's a history of Christendom. So one chapter for each century.
All right. Thanks so much, Joseph. It's always good to hear from you and to find out what's going on. Appreciate you being a guest here on Catholic Drive Time. Hope you have a great rest of your day and Happy New Year.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Happy New Year to you. God bless you.